Hi, I'm Hattie Volker from findyourtruevoice.co.uk and welcome to number 3 in my series of blogs on practical issues, tips and tricks to help with the practicalities around performing. Now today's one is going to be on how to cope when it goes wrong. This came up for a client of mine recently, and he was talking about a presentation he'd done a number of years ago where he suddenly felt his throat go dry and nerves getting the better of him. Panic was setting in, and his hands were shaking, and he found himself holding on to his notes and his lectern, I think he had, for dear life. So what is it? What's the best thing to do in this scenario? Because he asked, what should he have done with hindsight? Now, there is a simple shift to perspective that you can use to help you when things start to go wrong, and that's what I'm going to cover in this video. We've all been there. We've all been in the situation where we've forgotten our words, or we're worried that we're going to forget our words and we feel like the tension is creeping in, or we notice somebody in the audience we really want to impress and suddenly it all starts to go wrong. We start to feel ourselves not doing the best we can, or even making mistakes. We feel like our control is starting to slip away, and we might even start to panic. We desperately try and regain that control to try and make sure that our audience judges us well, to try and control how our audience judges us. What's going on in our heads then at that moment when we feel like things are starting to go wrong, when we feel like we're losing control? For my client, he suddenly felt really self-conscious in the sense that he became really conscious of what he was doing or what he wasn't doing and how he was going to be perceived. And the fear of negative judgment kicked in, and he felt powerless to control the situation, and he desperately wanted to get back in a position of control. What had happened was his limbic system had kicked in. And that's the lizard brain. That's the fight, flight, freeze part of our minds. And the conscious mind, at that point, when the limbic system's firing on all cylinders, the conscious mind is taking a back seat. It has disengaged. There's a hand theory of the mind which shows that if this is the brainstem and this is the limbic system, when we panic or feel shame, then our prefrontal cortex just flips up and disengages. And that, as performers, that can push us to have a drive to regain control. But is that drive wise in the circumstances? What happens when we try and take control is we start to cling on for dear life, and we start to have that tension creeping in. And whatever sort of performer you are, tension does not help with your performance. If you're a singer, it massively affects your vocal technique. As for an actor, and your breath control goes, and also your brain goes to the wrong place. As I said, shame can trigger that limbic system response too. We can then become preoccupied with how we're being judged and how we can stop this judgment, how we can get back control and try and control what the audience thinks of us and stop making failures and stop and hide the failures that we've made already. And this reaction is knee-jerk. It's not conscious and it's not well-reasoned and conducted by our executive function, because our executive function's gone, it's disappeared. So how do we solve this? The answer is simple. We re-engage our conscious mind so that we can make better decisions, and we re-engage the connection between our conscious mind and our body. How do we do this? Well, it's certainly not to have our conscious mind take control, which is the temptation. When things go wrong and when we're performing, so often the temptation is for our conscious mind to go, right, how am I going to fix this? I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. And that distracts us from our purpose, and it creates tension in itself. The temptation to boss ourselves around is not the place we need to be. We can use the conscious mind instead to observe what's going on and help make our response to what's going on a wise and proportionate response. How do we do that? Well, this is where I bring in the work of Dr. Dan Siegel, and he talks about naming it to tame it. This can take a millisecond, but can have a huge effect. If we can name what's going on for us in that moment, it has two major impacts. Neurologically, our prefrontal cortex re-engages and can assess the situation. And then it can release chemicals to calm our whole system down. So to calm the limbic system's adrenal response, it releases dopamine. And that will help us feel calmer. Psychologically, it allows us to acknowledge what's going on and the reality in a proportional way. So if we acknowledge what's really going on, we have the capacity there to re-engage with our purpose. The limbic system can't tell the difference between a mortal threat and an embarrassing situation. So it responds with that fight, flight, freeze, whatever the situation. Our prefrontal cortex can, and if we re-engage that, we can have a proportional response. So instead of thinking, I've got to run away, I've got to fight, hit out, get angry, or even I've just got to stop and freeze, none of which we want to happen in a performance, instead of that response, our prefrontal cortex can help us make a decision on the best way to move the performance forward and the most effective way. The reality is we all know the most effective way to move a performance forward, and that is to relax and let go of those mistakes. To do this, we have to let go of that desire to take control and just ride the wave, keep focused on our purpose as in the performance. Why are we there? What do we want to give our audience? What do we want to achieve? Hanging on to the mistake you've made doesn't serve you, and it definitely doesn't serve your audience. So the answer is to stop focusing on yourself, re-engage with your purpose, and focus your conscious mind on your audience and the result you want to achieve. If you do that, you will distract yourself from the tension caused by trying to take control. You will increase the ability for your body to relax because the dopamine can be released, and you will serve your audience better. Your audience is not served when you are thinking about the mistakes you're making, or the mistakes you've made, or the mistakes you're about to make. Your audience is served when you keep focused on your purpose. And in reality, so are you. I hope you've enjoyed this third of my blogs. Again, let me know if there's anything you want me to cover. I'm Hattie Volker. If you want to find out more about what I do, then visit my website at findyourtruevoice.co.uk. Thanks very much.